Species.
Hello and welcome to episode 117 of Origin of Species, the show where we talk about words, phrases, and all kinds of other stuff. This is the second to last episode of season 4. We'll have another one for you on June 15th and then take a little break before coming back for season 5. So make sure you're following our social media at Speaksies on Twitter and Instagram so you know when those new episodes will be coming out. If you're new to the show, please make sure you are subscribed. And if you feel so inclined, give us a 5-star rating. We would really appreciate that. So the theme for this episode is hippies. Where does the word come from? What does it mean? What are the connotations? And what does Steve think about hippies? Well, I bet you can guess, but if not, spoiler alert, the word dirty will be thrown around a lot. So this is a trigger warning for dirty hippies. Before we get into that, though, we're going to get a story from Steve about a awkward, cringy situation that happened with his neighbor. Thank you so much for listening to Origin of Speaksies. We really appreciate it. Now, on with the show.
I haven't dated in a very long time, mostly because I've been married a very long time, and my wife's a little bit of a stick in the mud, doesn't like me doing that. But I'd imagine when I was dating, really wasn't that good at it. And I had an incident lately that made me think of, there's got to be certain things you do on a date that if you do this thing, you can't recover. You could be the greatest person in the world, the handsomest person in the world, but there's just certain faux pas that happen that are unrecoverable. So I had one, wasn't necessarily a dating situation, but I think you'll see where this goes here in a minute. So as you know, recently been doing a lot of projects at the house, doing a lot of work on the yard, been working on my deck. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too. Some work my dad and I did on the deck. But in leading up to it and demoing it, I, took everything down, and I wanted to make sure that when my dad and I got together, I had all the lumber available. So, I have, I always talk about him in code, but in real life, I have great neighbors. I have the mayor. It's kind of like he's the mayor of the court in a good way, not like in a Simpsons mayor way, in a great way. I have my neighbor, the Italian, who you might guess is Italian.
I was going to say, where is he from?
Yeah, and he looks like it too. I have my neighbor who I can't give a nickname because he went to UVA. I like the guy, but every time I try to come up with a nickname for him, it becomes like backhanded. Like the most recent one I was going to do, he played very well at cornhole. I was going to call him the Sackmaster, but I realized it's catchy, but it's not. I like the guy. So he's my neighbor I like who went to UVA. That'll be his nickname for now. So as you know, as somebody... actually, you don't know. If you've ever owned a truck, the worst downside of owning a truck is everyone knows that you own a truck. So you have to deal with people like me. So I reached out to the Italian to help me go to Home Depot, load up all these planks of wood, get there, load up. So we have to look at them, make sure they're not warped or fungus on them and all that. So get 20-something, 12-foot planks of wood, load them up, go up. Getting ready to walk out, I go to the cash register and I do the self.
Oh, you didn't have the.
And I made someone take me in their truck, load up all this crap, and then didn't have money for $400-something worth of wood. So this wasn't like,
oh my gosh,
we're at Sonic. So the Italian.
That's if I may, that's. Maybe the cringiest thing I've ever heard. It was rough.
It was awful. And this is also the guy that helped me dig a hole in the backyard. And I don't want to stereotype people, but there was a hole that was empty that I was afraid I was going to end up in. But my neighbor, the
this
Italian,
was the Italian. Yeah.
Awesome guy. Got it. I got home, got in my car, drove immediately to the bank, got the amount plus some in cash to give to him. So I didn't have put him through the indignity of me writing him a check. So shout out to my great neighbor, the Italian,
That's funny.
who paid for my deck, was paid back. Great guy. And so far hasn't buried me in the hole in the backyard.
You're still here, man. I
For now.
think he may come ask you for a favor at some point and just
Yeah.
make sure that, you
Frankly,
got,
I owe him. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
kill somebody for him. Now, if he asked me, like, take him to the airport,
I was going to
probably
say,
not. Yeah, there are
don't
limits.
go
to
to
what
the
I'll do.
Pine Barrens or get out on a boat with him.
Yeah.
There's the implication there, but yeah, that would be a I would agree with you that now that in that case, you've known the guy for a while, and he knows you're good for it. At least I'm sure.
Well, we'll see. I haven't gone out in public with them since. I did pay him back immediately.
I do like the idea though. Like, what if it was a long con? Like, how long have you known this guy?
Oh, a long time.
What if that was the thing where you're like,
years.
hey, yeah, okay. So I'm like at some point you realize I'm cashing this in. I'm gonna have him take me with his truck and go have him pay for the lumber and then just see what happens. But again, it's the Italian. Now maybe if it was Sackmaster, you might pull that off, so to speak. But welcome to Origin of Species. My name is Scott. I'm here alongside virtually my good friend Steve. And I'm very excited about tonight's episode.
I'm excited too. It's gonna be a good one.
The other day I was you and I talk about this when we prepare for doing these shows where especially now that we've been putting out the Origin of Species show every other week.
Right.
There's you're not coming up with a new topic every week. So there's different topics that you want to get to, different words and phrases you want to get to. But sometimes they get stale when they sit around for a while. And speaking of stale,
foreshadowing.
I'm foreshadowing. I saw on a friend of mine's on Instagram had posted something, and it was like the definition of the word hippie. And I was like, hippie. We've on this show thrown around the word hippie pretty liberally and pretty as a pejorative, and generally proceeded with the words dirty. And I thought, why don't we do a show and talk about the etymology and origins of the word hippie? And we'll do a couple other ones too, but we're gonna start with hippie. So, like I said, hippies have come up from time to time on the show. Before we get started with the origin, I just want to kind of give you the floor. And what's your initial reaction when I first told you we were going to do this? Kind of tell me what your reaction was and how are you feeling now? And go.
Well, my first, it's something I'm passionate about, but something I'm also passionate about is the way on our show that if we take a subject matter, if it's something that's maybe contentious or political or something that seems to skew to one side of things, we try our best to be very even-handed, to make sure we're looking at both sides of an issue, and if we have some personal biases, to not let those show. This, however, will not be an example of that, because we're going to talk about dirty hippies, the bane of my existence. And this will be a wonderful subject to talk about just why they're so dirty and why they're so awful and my experiences with them. It's just going to be a really negative. It's going to be a pretty negative show, but I don't think it also if anyone's seen video clips of this, like the Scott generally doesn't see me this happy talking about stuff. So the fact we're going to talk about hippies is going to be awesome.
I wanted you to be, when I got this idea, I said, this will be either the best or the worst idea, because it's possible Steve could say, because we do try to be even-handed. And I was going to say, let's come up with some good things about hippies or your favorite hippie. I was like, you got to be able to find some. And it's almost like, God trying to find the one person in, Sodom that was a good man. If I'm getting that story right, there was no Lot in this situation to throw a biblical reference out there. I couldn't think of really one that would be good. And I'm like, if I can't think of one, I don't know how Steve's going to. So we may
Spoiler, I won't.
Yeah. And that's what I said. No, we're just going to keep it super negative. So we're going to talk about the connotations of the word hippie, where it came
Mhm.
from. It's not. It may be negative coming from us and mainly Steve, but
Yeah.
it won't be a completely downer of an episode. It'll be fun. If you don't find jokes at the expense of hippies
Mhm.
like funny or entertaining, you
Yeah.
may want to. Honestly, to God, I can't believe I'm saying this. You might want to skip this episode.
Yeah. And you probably won't go take a bath
Yeah.
either if you're
Personal
offended.
hygiene is going to come up. So let's start here. There are a ton of articles. Matter of fact, there were a ton of articles about hippies, and some of the headlines were pretty great. Just one was from The Guardian, and it just says, "The hippie is back. Not so cool if you remember it the first time around." From womb workshops to naked retreats, the Instagram generation are embracing hippie 2.0. But is it the real deal? I didn't really read that article, and we're not going to use it for the episode, but I just thought that was funny. The hippie is back, and it's if you remember it the first time, it's not so cool. I'm going to be using, though, two main sources for this. The first one is a place that we reference a lot, which is Grammarist. They really broke this down. But the other one is a website I'd never heard of before, but there's a gentleman by the name of Oz Chin, which I already like him because the first name Oz could be Oz Fox, the Wizard of Oz. He has a blog, and he has it's more than just a blog. I really don't know what this guy does, because he has a weekly digest on psychology and money.
And probably a fake name.
It could be.
Yeah. And if it's not, kudos to him. And if it is a fake name, kudos to him too, because either way, it's a great name. I want to listen to what he has to say. As soon as I stop interrupting you, I'm interested what Oz Chin has to say.
Hey man, you interrupt away, because you're going to be fired up throughout this. And I'm just going to be
tough getting me to shut up.
You can just go. I want you to just go. So, but Oz took a kind of somewhat even-handed approach to this, but the name of his article is "The Origins of Hippie: Etymology, History, and a New Curiosity." So what he did, and the reason why I want to use this guy's website, is he was kind of like us in that he's like, I want to know where this came from. I don't see any real good articles. So he did what sometimes, back when I actually worked around people, I would do a little poll and say, what do you think this means? Where did it come from? What he did was he has a pretty good, I think a decent following on his Facebook group. And he put out a question to everyone in the group that says, what comes to mind when you think of the word hippie? And so let me read to you, and this is straight off of Facebook. I'm reading screenshots from Facebook.
Okay.
And here's what we got. The first one was dirty, stoned white people. That one got a lot of likes. Free spirited. That one didn't get many likes. Freedom, love, colorful clothes, lava lamps, Woodstock, drugs, protests, drugs, tie-dye, drugs, 60s dreads, flower power, a lot of ones that say drugs, flower child. One of these, he had to gray out the first part, but it ended with "that'll give you tetanus." So I'm not sure what was going to give you tetanus, but it had to do with the hippie. And then the last one said "lover of all, smelly / no deodorant, vegetarian, eats only vegetables." And it says, these are not just one word, but take what you will from this. So he then went on to give a quote from Ronald Reagan, which I thought you might like. And it said, Ronald Reagan was known for saying that a hippie is someone who dresses like Tarzan, has hair like Jane, and smells like cheetah. So Ronald Reagan.
Chew. I don't need that. I just need that quote. I'm sorry. Please go. Continue.
No, that's it. That was that's the show. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I thought you would enjoy that one because it made me laugh. And for those of you that don't know who Cheetah is, actually, who was Cheetah? Was Cheetah the
chimp?
Monkey? The chimp. That's right.
The chimp.
I was like, I know it wasn't actually a cheetah, but it was a.
Yeah. That actually would have made it sound cool.
Yeah, exactly. So, he said that he associates the word hippie with someone who's peaceful, insufferably spiritual, and dabbles in questionable lifestyle practices.
Yeah. I like the insufferable part. I think that he was on something with that. I think a lot of my problems with hippies, and there's lots of them. I think most of my experience with hippies are like from college age when you meet hippies that were, I always called them like Nova hippies, like Northern Virginia hippies, that they were groovy and hippie and smelly and like natural stuff. But they were able to kind of have that lifestyle because dad worked for a defense contractor, mom was a lawyer. It's a lot easier
Right.
to be back to earth when someone's paying your bills.
Well,
And
yeah, so that's a really good point. Is it's one thing if you can't afford deodorant or
right,
it's a religious reason. It's another thing when you've sort of concocted some sort of,
right,
weed fueled life, worldview
hmm,
that includes you smelling bad. And
right,
and then the kicker being you get to be self-righteous somehow.
yeah,
How does
yeah,
that work?
it doesn't. That's why no one likes hippies, and that's why
So
we're having this show today.
this is like this is already descending into the just what I knew was going to happen, even
Hmm.
though I thought I was starting with the article from the guy that was like even-handed, but
Yeah.
but the fact that I was trying to put, I thought that this wasn't negative, and then I realized he
Hmm.
said insufferably spiritual. So
Yeah.
Oz Chin may be another guy that we need to like find out more about.
Yeah.
So let's talk real quick though about the etymology of it, and
Sure.
I think it's pretty. You can frankly, I'm not going to sit here and quote from a bunch of articles. I'm just going to tell you what I read because it's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward. So basically, you have um the word hip and hep.
Hmm.
These words were sort of interchangeable and initially meant in the know. So I will go to worldwide words here. Michael Quinion had a short uh, entry on it, and we don't exactly know where hip came from, but here's a couple
Hmm.
of ideas. Hippie first is recorded in print in the 1950s, and it comes from hip. We know it came from hip, which came around the turn of the century, the early 1900s, which was itself a variant of the word hep.
Hmm.
But it's kind of confusing because hip is recorded earlier than hep by a few years. So there's a lot of, nobody's really sure which came first there.
Hmm.
We think hep. There are several theories about the origin of the word hip. One of those is that it came from opium smokers,
Hmm.
which does kind of fit.
Yeah.
And they would refer to when they were smoking as on the hip, as they were reclined while smoking. There's another theory that there's a West African. Well, this isn't a theory. There is a West African language called Wolof, and
Hmm.
there is a word called hippicat, Hippicat, meaning one who has his eyes wide open, aka woke.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
where so hippicat could be
Hmm.
potentially where hepcat came from, but the grammophobia article actually debunks that, which I won't really get into because it can
Right.
get tedious. But basically, hippicat, this African language, no, that's not where it came from. The other theory was apocryphal, that it was a variant from a drill master, hep
Hmm.
2 3 4,
Mm.
which was supposedly taken over into jazz as a way
Mm.
of giving the beat.
Okay.
So that one, I said it's apocryphal. What's not apocryphal is that we know that jazz played a role in
Yeah.
the phrase hippie, because jazz, you know, was meant to be cool and a lot of slang
Hmm.
came from it. Now, whether it came from hep 2 3 4, who knows?
Right.
But saying hep, saying hip was definitely meant you were cool, you were in the know. And the word hipster was also
Hmm.
around during that time. And it basically meant
Yeah.
that you were keeping up with the latest trends. And that's something that is still used today in that
Right.
way, I think. So going to Grammarist, I will mention a couple just ways that the connotation of hippie has changed over the years.
Hmm.
So again, in the 50s, when it really started coming up, at that point, it moved from being like you're a hip person, you're in the know, to
Yeah.
a disparaging term, with someone, this is where actually hipster comes in, a disparaging
Yeah.
term for someone who is always up on the latest trends, especially in jazz. It started to change in the 60s, according to Chambers Dictionary of Etymology,
Mhm.
when hippie came to mean maybe what we first think of, which is a young person characterized by long hair, unconventional clothes, drug
Mhm.
use, and counterculture values.
Right.
It sort of started to lose the connotation of being somebody who's in the know and
Yeah.
I guess hip. Uh,
And that
this
sounds
is
to me like that. I've always thought it kind of came out of beatnik culture, or the beats from like the 50s and early 60s. Am I stepping on your toes with anything?
no,
With that, yeah.
go on.
So it always seemed to come from the beats. That it seemed to
Yep.
be the next like kind of natural progression. And even see like, Allen Ginsberg with Howl, him starting as a beat and then moving into a filthy, dirty, drug using hippie.
I've
And
seen the greatest minds of my generation using
yeah,
Toms of Maine.
yeah, instead of Rogaine. But
Yeah.
anyway, he's dead. And I don't know. I think with a lot of for someone that doesn't like hippies, there's I guess there's always the what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of transgressive stuff that came out of it that maybe was good. But as with all stuff, it gets watered down eventually, and becomes something like a total blanket term. Like if hippie did
Yes.
mean something, by the time you're watching the Brady Bunch at the end of the 60s, and you see what Greg Brady's dressed up as a version of a hippie, which our
Right.
good friend Bill Cannell has pointed out. If you ever watch any like late 60s like talk show or cop show, that when they play a hippie character, he's always got a brown vest with tassels on it. And the next time you watch any sort of show you will see, that's what you'll see, the hippie outfit.
Well, I have a very clear picture of Greg Brady in his hippie outfit, but yeah, so you nailed it. And basically that is where it went from. So it went from kind of being hip and hep being terms for knowing what the latest, it's jive talk, to people making fun of those people as hipsters, to then the word hipster morphing into hippies and counterculture in the 60s, and with the beat poets, as you mentioned. Then for it to become more of a general overarching term, now to the point where it I would say it doesn't mean much, but I don't think that's true, because I do think it conjures up an image. But what it does is it's more maybe the flower power, like a suburban kid that wants to listen to Bob Marley and wear a certain type of clothing. It's a vibe, as the kids say, more so than anything else. But it's also still a very powerful pejorative that can be used at any time for somebody you don't like.
There are a wide range of people you don't like, and that's what I seem to like blanket use that with.
I also like one of my favorite moments in the movie theater in the past few years, and so Steve and I have been known to take in a movie together as two men that somewhat life partners, and we've seen a lot of the Tarantino movies together. You know where I'm going with this is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it, but if I can, I want to put just a clip montage of all the times Rick Dalton calls people dirty hippies.
Everything's okay now, honey, but some hippies broke into the house next door.
Oh my god. Oh, that's terrifying.
Fucking hippie motherfuckers.
Bunch of goddamn fucking hippies.
So you gave all these hippies permission to be here?
More hippie-ish. You want me to look like a hippie?
Hippie girl, 50 cents.
Fucking hippies came up here to smoke dope on a dark road, huh?
What did these perpetrators do?
Perpetrators, they were hippie assholes.
Oh, these fucking hippie weirdos, they broke into my house.
I just want to make sure you're okay, and that all these hippies aren't taking advantage of you.
Is everybody okay?
Well, the fucking hippies aren't. That's for goddamn sure. Dirty fucking hippies.
It's pretty good. I think you and I had really bonded over that moment of, or the many moments where Brad Pitt's character kicks the hippie's ass, and then Leonardo DiCaprio, sort of at the end of the movie, just really they let him have it. It was pretty beautiful.
It was the best ending to a movie since the end of Easy Rider.
Speaking of hippies,
yeah,
I've seen Easy Rider, but it was
watch the end and you'll understand what I mean.
Okay, so I'm guessing the hippies don't make off with like a fortune of gold and not spend it on deodorant.
I'll give you something to look up on YouTube later.
Will
so when did hippie, like, so obviously there's a hippie movement in the late 60s.
Yep.
Went into the 70s a little bit, and people like me will use it as a blanket pejorative for anyone who is into natural stuff or is kind of, obnoxiously left wing, or, there's just a lot of ways that that can be used. But when did it ever really go away?
Yeah, I mean, according to the articles I read, it was, late 70s. The idea of the hippie as being an actual sort of movement or thing that was truly the hippie that we picture kind of went away in the 80s, and it was replaced with one of the terms we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is not yuppie, but what was the other one? Hippies and preppies. When you think of the 80s, I think in a lot of ways it was a reaction to the 70s, which were kind of just a bad. It wasn't
a great time for everybody,
right? So again, from the multiple articles I read, that it sort of was the late 70s and then pretty much gone in the 80s. The 90s, the aesthetic came back in many ways. I said I wasn't going to read this Guardian article, but I'll just sort of mention hippies. I mean, you're always going to have the things that make a hippie that you and I don't like. The way they smell and stuff aside, because I think we brought that point home. The thing about, let me tell you about this natural thing that's way better than big pharma, and I'm superior to you. That's stronger now than ever. So you can call them hippies, and that's what this article by on the Guardian about saying the hippies back, not so cool. If you remember the first time around is, all of this nonsense that we have now with people that have the money to spend on
goop. The goop culture. Yeah. That you have so much money that you can do stupid things that don't work. Because whether you realize it or not, you still have access to medicine and, good care if you need it, if you mess up steaming your own vagina, which is a real thing.
And yes, it is. And I forgot to tell you, our friend from back in the day, Danny Duncack,
he sent me his own vagina.
He sent me. Yeah, hi Danny. He sent me a picture that he took of a car. He was driving behind a car, and there was a big like one of those decals of some place, and it said vaginal steaming. So it was a service. So he made sure to let me know that vaginal steaming is. He thought of us, and that's really good.
And to be clear, if Danny steamed anything, it would be a tremendous penis. Just to pass that on.
Yeah, I know that, but how do you know that? Now that's an offline conversation we're gonna have.
Well, if you'd like to know, become a Species supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/Species for Species Uncut, where every other week Scott and I talk maybe a little bit more openly about subjects like our friends' penises from high school.
Absolutely. Speaking of uncut.
So
spoiler alert. So Steve, what I'd like to do now is before we move on from this, I told you we were going to play a game called Are They a Dirty Hippie? And I'm going to bring, I think I have 5 or 6 people, and we're going to play this game. And for those of you listening, there are pictures that go along with this that you will not be able to see unless you go to Patreon and sign up. Otherwise, just picture in your head, none of these people are people you may not have heard of some of them, but
we'll find out.
Let's find out. Let's get started with the game. We need a theme song.
What's your name, son?
We have some hippies out there in the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco.
Don't you know my name? My name's Blue Boy.
This fella that was doing the talking had a haircut like Tarzan, he walked like Jane, and smelled like Cheetah.
You can't own property, man.
All right, son, you're under arrest.
I can, but that's because I'm not a penniless hippie.
And there are some people here who do care.
Bunch of goddamn fucking hippies.
So I want you to know that, trees.
There I am. I'm over there now. I'm not here anymore. My hair's green and I'm a tree.
Come on, son.
Even if your body does die, your mind will.
So are they a dirty, dirty hippie? All right. So the first one, let me just pull up the game screen here. Okay. It's not, by the way, the cover of the game has the lovely, I blocked her name out.
Is that Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks.
All right. Don't drag Stevie Nicks into this.
I believe I just did. Wait, did we find a hippie that you like already?
She's awesome.
Okay. I'm not a big Stevie Nicks fan. Okay. And I guess you could say she's maybe witchy, but
yeah,
I'd also, this is going really well so far.
Listen, she wears a lot of white flowing robes. She's not wearing tie-dye. They're not stained with her armpit hair.
Okay. Well, this is the game where we ask Steve, are they a dirty, dirty hippie? So it's already controversial. We haven't even got the first one. First one, it's a softball.
Oh, filthy hippie.
Yeah, this is Shaggy. Well, let me tell the audience who it is real quick. This is Shaggy from Scooby-Doo eating a sub.
Yeah, and not the only edible thing he probably ingested. Good way to introduce drug culture to children. And how did they all live in that van, regardless, especially with a filthy hippie and a dog? Shaggy's still the dirtiest person in there. Obviously, stoner culture appropriation. Boo for Shaggy.
Boo for Shaggy.
Boo for Shaggy.
Yeah, I don't know what, it's like one of those things that I was like today years old. I mean, there was one of those moments where I was like, oh, Shaggy was like clearly just overtly a stoner. And when you're a kid, you don't really know. You're just like, why does this guy have? Yeah, he's got brain damage.
And they probably had to live in the Mystery Mobile because it was Shaggy's turn to pay the electric bill, and he didn't because he's a pothead.
All right, so I told you that was a softball.
Yeah,
Shaggy. All right, the next one up is Metaphysical Megan. So going to our previous conversation, would you consider her a dirty, dirty hippie, or maybe something else?
That's a good one. So Metaphysical Megan, I forget what episode we discussed her in, but she was the one that introduced us to the concept of suntanning your butthole.
Yes.
There's a more medical term for it, but let's just be honest. That's what she's doing. And in the picture you're showing me, her O-ring's getting a good dose of vitamin D. I would say based on other things I read about her, dirty hippie, but maybe this extra sunlight, nothing I'm going to say is not going to be gross. Dirty hippie, but definitely I would put that kind of Northern Virginia trust fund hippie. I have a feeling that she's got somebody in her life that actually had a real job, so she can spend time taking pictures of her butthole being bathed in the sunlight.
Now, one thing that I noticed when I was looking up Metaphysical Megan, because I have a feeling that a lot of these, if not all, are going to end up being called a dirty, dirty hippie. Do you know that she describes herself as a self-described hydration and sex priestess?
Wow.
Which the two do go hand in hand, I guess, but what a weird niche. I'm a hydration and sex priestess.
Well, she's going to need to have some water after she starts. I don't know how you apply the aloe vera in that situation if things get out of hand.
All right. Well, so we're saying yes. And maybe what we should do as this game sort of goes along is, are they a dirty, like how many dirties go in front of the hippie? So
she's dirty.
She's dirty. Shaggy was
dirty.
A dirty, 3 dirties. And then now let's get to our next one, which is, Gilligan, Bob Denver, aka Gilligan. Would you consider him a hippie?
I would, and this is why. And I think I might have given it away a little bit. He before he was famous as the hapless Gilligan on Gilligan's Island, he was a beatnik on the Many Lives of Dobie Gillis, the something.
Maynard
Bernard J.
Krebs.
Krebs.
Maynard G. Krebs.
Anyway, beatnik, basically a dirty hippie. Looked a lot like Shaggy with a a goatee. So I'll give him a dirty hippie. I like Gilligan though. That seemed to help, but still. If it wasn't for him, if it wasn't for the beats, we wouldn't have the hippies. So I got to give him a dirty on that.
Okay, 2 dirties on this one. And by the way, I found as I was looking at for pictures for this. And by the way, I'm so glad you got the Dobie Gillis thing.
Thank you.
And I read that I guess the creator, I can't remember who created the show. Probably some Sherwood Schwartz or some famous guy.
I think actually that was it.
Okay. You can pretty much throw a dart at shows from this era and he's going to be the creator, but that they thought that Bob Denver, this just sounds funny now that we know him as Gilligan, was too cool for the role. Like and if you look at photos of Bob Denver pre-Gilligan, he looks like a cool guy, a hip guy, he's got some headshots then you look at Gilligan and it's like, he played that for the rest of his life.
Yeah, he was typecast, and there's no way to put that outfit on and not look like a doofus, pretty much. But
yeah. All right, let's move
Gilligan.
on. I think we've got maybe 2 more, maybe 3 more. So let's roll on. Oh, speaking of Goop, we have the founder of Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow. So this is similar to Metaphysical Megan. Would you consider her a dirty hippie?
I actually am going to say no, because I think what she does, she almost does like hippie blackface. Like what she does. She's some sort of like hippie grifter that it's brilliant. Like it's like, I'll make fun of Toms of Maine, but I also don't have people spending money to buy a product that doesn't work and spending extra for it, for their deodorant that doesn't get things done.
Do you think she uses her products honestly?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I never thought about that until you just hippie grifter was a phrase that was in my head right before you said it. And I think that's right.
Yeah. Like a hippie minstrel.
There's no way she smells bad. That's it, which if you can't go through,
you can't make, but she makes enough money that she doesn't smell bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? That just happens at that kind of Bill Gates. I mean, she's not that loaded, but she's not cutting coupons either. No. She's doing all right. Good. I actually kudos to Gwyneth Paltrow for taking white women's money and for them to stick things up their butts or steam their vaginas.
Okay. All right. We got our first not a dirty trip or not a dirty hippie. Moving on. We have 2 more. We have next. Oh, Bob Ross.
So Bob Ross, not a dirty hippie. Bob Ross had to have his perm because when he was an up and coming painter, he was giving exhibitions places and was also being recorded, and he had to have his hair, didn't have time for haircuts. So he got that perm because he traveled so much and didn't want to have to get a haircut and didn't want his hair looking different.
Did we just get some Bob Ross facts?
Yeah.
I like it.
I like Bob Ross a whole lot. Bob Ross is one of the best ever. And if you're in a bad, all the negativity I've put out in the show, and I'm not done.
Take your time.
You are in a bad mood. Sit down and watch Bob Ross paint. If you are not, if that doesn't make you feel better, you have no soul. So I will make it negative somehow. You got it. Bob Ross is the greatest. I have nothing bad to say about Bob Ross.
You can't. And I told you these were going to get harder as they went. And I was really curious if you were going to be able to spin Bob Ross into a dirty hippie. But he does his, he does his, hey, let's put a happy little tree thing. But I agree with you. I mean, my daughter and I used to watch this before bed all the time, and it's just soothing, and can't say anything bad about Bob Ross.
Bob Ross also was in the Air Force, and Bob Ross went somewhere to get his hair permed. He didn't keep himself from bathing, so his hair got stuck that way. Big difference.
Right. Bob Ross facts. This next one, probably not as well known as Bob Ross. It's Young Gravy. Could you consider now just remember what the criteria for hippie is as you make this decision.
Yeah. Gotta say, my man, Young Gravy, who I have a love-hate relationship with. I hate listening to a lot of his songs. I came very close to sending you a song the other day called Karen Part 2. it's awesome. It's like a minute and a half long. And again, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe I'm letting myself be recorded saying that. But Young Gravy, not a hippie. He's from the streets like me.
Okay, good.
And despite that outfit, I think he's wearing it ironically.
Yeah, he might be. He's not a hippie. Good job. Although I would have also accepted, yes, he is a dirty hippie because of just the picture here and the facial hair, and he doesn't look like he smells good. But he probably does. All right, last
he probably
one
smells like too much cologne. I'd say if anything,
okay.
Instead of like cover himself up in patchouli, there's some sort of like he sounds like the cologne counter at the mall probably. So there, I said something bad about him.
There you go. Good.
Yeah.
And then the last one, maybe not so much hippie, but the term that sort of branched off at a certain time, hipster, is myself. So as we've discussed, I kind of have to do the beard thing.
Yeah.
This is a picture of me with a flannel, a craft beer, an unlit cigarette, which is a clove cigarette.
Did you hand roll it?
I didn't, but probably somebody did. Some Ray-Bans, and am I a dirty hippie / hipster?
So when I say hippie, generally, what's the first word I say with that? That's not a profanity.
Dirty
or stink.
Filthy.
Right? Filthy.
Stink, yeah.
We would not work. And I'm dead serious. If you smelled, that is we wouldn't be podcasting together, even though, and make clear, we podcast together for a long time before we started doing remote stuff. So this isn't like a late development. I know that you buy real deodorant, you wash, and you're also out there trying to get some. So you got to do what you got to do. And I'll give, in defense of hippies, there's that whole thing of there's certain stuff you got to do for the ladies. And if the ladies are into the beard and into like the lumberjack cosplay outfit that you like to wear, go for it. You got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do, man.
And you will say for the hippies, if you can go out there, if there's there's some guy somewhere that found a way. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to wash. I'm going to smell. I'm going to grow my hair. And I'm going to do lots of drugs. And somehow I'm going to be out there like Young Gravy, giving people the business, to quote him. I'll give the hippies that. You got to do what you got to do sometimes. And sometimes that's cause an outbreak of chlamydia in Northern California. So there's a long way for me to go, Liv. You're not a dirty hippie, because we wouldn't be friends.
I'll give you, and before we did this, and I added this last second, and I thought to myself, I know his answer is going to be, if the answer was yes, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. So you nailed it. You nailed it.
The truest answer I could give.
I do have to say this one thing though, which is really, really funny. My son, the other day, it was like 8:00. We had played some basketball outside earlier. So I had been sweating, and I was maybe a little funky. And my 13-year-old son he kept sniffing around me. He kept going like he was trying to tell me something. And then finally he goes, "Hey Dad, are you gonna take a shower tonight?"
Oh, good job.
And I was like, I said, "Oh my gosh, do I smell that bad?" He's like, "Yeah, it's really bad." And I was just like, okay. Yeah. I never want my kids to have to ask me if I'm going to take a shower again soon, or if I'm going to take a shower soon again. So,
but the important thing is you did take a shower, and you didn't put it back on him that the corporations tell him he needs to smell that way, and that you're going to go tan your O-ring in the backyard now.
That's true. All right. Well, I'm glad you didn't think I was a dirty hippie / hipster. That was our game. I hope you enjoyed it. We are going to wrap up the hippie talk and move on to another term or two. But first, we have a new segment, I believe, which Steve is going to do. So let's get into that right now.
So this new segment is called Fake Ads. And the background was, a couple years ago, our friend Robert Banquette. And by the way, people ask me all the time, where is Robert Banquette?
They ask me too, and it's not even my podcast.
And I tell them that, he was our friend from Alabama, that we did a season of stuff. I was kind of like his producer and helped him out. Ever since Alabama won the national championship, he's gone off the reservation. We don't know where he is. I think he's going to be celebrating for the next couple years, or at least till football season.
I also don't think he likes us personally.
I don't think he likes anybody. And I respect that about it. I think it was one of the things we bonded on. But the other thing I enjoyed about him was because of his influence, he was able to do a lot of different ads. He had some local restaurants in the Montgomery area. He also had an ad with New York Times. You know, he had New York Times sponsoring him. So I was able to kind of help him make some copy for those things. And I miss that. And I think that, you know, I don't have many regrets in life, but I think if I had the chance to like do ads or do, you know, jingles, to put something together for advertisements, I think I'd be pretty good at that.
Okay. So should we test it out?
I think we should. So what I've asked Scott is to just give me a product.
Okay.
I don't know what the product is. It could be anything. And let's just see what I could do to spin it into an ad.
Okay. So
on the spot.
The first product, and maybe we're only doing one, is Jack Link's beef jerky.
Jack Link's beef jerky. Hi, this is Steve Glissman with Origin of Species. Let me tell you why I like Jack Link's beef jerky. Several months ago, it came to my attention that I had gained weight. It was part of COVID season, I think. It was the holidays. Everything seemed to add up on me. Gained a little bit of weight. And at Christmas time, my parents, you know, had asked me what I need for a gift. I need a new pair of jeans. So I requested a pair of jeans, and I gave them like what my jean size is. There's a size that I wear, regardless of whether my body agrees or not. For some reason, the jeans didn't show up at Christmas, which was fine. But as I would, you know, run into my parents over the next several weeks, I kind of remind them, you know, or they'd say, hey, we'd forgotten about your jeans. But I told them not to rush. That I told, you know, it's the holidays. I've been eating a lot of sourdough bread. Put on a little bit of weight. So after I said that a few times, my dad pointed out that you can go to Walmart and you can get some Wrangler jeans that have a elastic waistband.
Hell yeah.
So I was like, okay, thanks for sharing that for me. Then later I found out that my dad called my wife and asked what my actual pant size was, because he was going to buy me some Wranglers with the expandable waist. And I told him that that wasn't necessary. And then he came to visit, and I told my wife ahead of time, I was like, when my dad comes to visit, I know my father. He's going to have a pair of those jeans for me. You need to tell him not to put those jeans in front of me because it's not going to end well. And I was correct. So when this all happened, I realized that I had put on some weight. And I decided to do something a little bit different. I took it personally. I decided I wasn't just going to, you know, be insulted or get angry by this. I was going to take, because I was insulted and I was angry, but I was going to take that to encourage me. I was going to use it as motivation to make sure that I lost weight and that it wouldn't be funny to bring me fat pants anymore. So I started, as you're well aware, and actually, if anyone watches the last video, one of the first uncuts we did back in, February, you'll notice a difference. I got back in the grind, started counting my calories, started exercising more, started tracking, and the pounds started coming off. To date, I've lost, I don't know the percentage. I'll tell you though. My goal is to lose 28 pounds. I've lost 22 pounds so far. Took it personal. And when the next times my dad came up, he saw how much weight I had lost. And we worked together. We worked on the deck that I was talking about earlier with the Italian. He could see what I'd done. I could tell that, you know, he quit making the fat jokes, quit talking about the pants. And, you know, when we put the deck together, I got to tell you, Scott, it was one of the best times I ever had with him. But you know what? I'd taken it personally.
Yes.
You know, something else I also took? I took his credit card. So when my dad came up to help me make the deck, and he's not aware of this yet. He might find out right now as he listens to this. I decided to make some purchases with his credit card. So are you aware that you can buy dildos on Amazon?
Of course. I mean, no.
No. Well, I tell you who's aware now. All his old neighbors. He's just moved, but I made sure that everyone around him
Oh no.
received. And let me tell you, dildo technology it's pretty impressive.
It doesn't get talked about enough.
It doesn't, and especially on Amazon. Amazon, what can't you do? So you know what else you can do on Amazon? You can order more dildos, and then you can send them to all the elders at his church and make sure that they know that it came from him. So when I'm hungry, I take it personal. And that's why I use, what is it again?
Jack Links.
Jack Links. The beef jerky for me. This has been Steve with Origin of Species by Beef Links.
Jack Links. Beef jerky. All right, so thank you for that. That was great. I think the folks at Jack Links are going to really.
I think that I got it. I think this might be the end of our podcast because I'm going to be doing promos all the time now.
Oh,
after that, I'm pretty sure.
I at about 2 minutes in, I stopped waiting. Like I was not sure if I was going to actually hear the term Jack Links come in at all, but very, very good. That was a fake ad read from Steve Glissman.
Yeah. And if you're interested in Scott or me, probably me, cutting ads for you, look us up. You can email us at scott@speaksies.com or steve@speaksies.com.
Wow. Please do. Please feel free to reach out. So before we wrap up the show, unless Steve had any more ads he wanted to do.
Not today.
Not today. Okay. I do look forward to the next one though.
Yeah.
I don't know that Jack Links is gonna want to hire us based on that. Not that it was bad. It wasn't so much about Jack Links, I mean, you got to it.
Yeah, okay. I think it was. I mean, it's obvious it was about that.
I would say that the only part, if I can just give one note, and far be it from me, because you are the guy that does this. You've learned from the school of Bob Banquette, but my only note would be, try not to go, what's the product again? During the read.
Yeah.
If you can remember one thing, because otherwise I think it was flawless. I left wanting to have Jack Links, but there was that moment where you seem to not remember. Actually, I do think it happened twice. Yeah. So I would say, other than that, flawless.
Yeah. So that's what editing's for. But anyway, Jack Links, you've got our emails. Reach out to us. Jack
Links, go mess with Sasquatch, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Or mess with your dad. So when thinking about this episode, I wanted couldn't just all be about hippies. I wanted to bring in another one, another term that was about, a type of person.
Yeah.
And I thought the natural one to do in contrast to hippie would be preppy. And frankly, if you want to get a little inside baseball to the show, the number one, reason was that it rhymed with hippie. So
they're both fun to say. And what I think about one of the things that's great about hippie being a pejorative is it's fun to say, like, when you filthy hippie, you dirty hippie, you peace loving, protesting, non-job having, smelly hippie. It just flows.
It does. And I do realize that you just wanted a chance to say all those things again, but you're right. And we've said it so many times that it's just beyond being repetitive, but terms stick around, phrases stick around because they are fun to say. Preppy is another one. The only problem with it is that I realized, like, right after I started doing research for this one, after I'd already pretty much told Steve we're doing hippies and preppies, that there's really just nothing really to this. So what I think I'll do is I'm going to read the Urban Dictionary definition for preppy. And then maybe just for a minute, we can talk about some of our favorite preppies of all time.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to our last term, and we're gonna wrap this thing up. Preppies by Urban Dictionary. The definition is preppies. Preppies are people who go to preparatory high schools, and then it lists a bunch. Most of them shop at J. Crew, Banana Republic, Brooks Brothers, LL Bean, Ralph Lauren, and all designer stores. Preppies are often mistaken for kids who shop at Abercrombie and Fitch, American Eagle Outfitters, Rave, etc. Those who think preppies are girls who shop at those stores are very wrong, in all caps. That is just maybe the most bizarre entry into the Urban Dictionary, which is saying something.
Yeah.
The person who created this entry wanted to make sure that the reader knows that calling someone a preppy because they shop at American Eagle is absolutely not correct. So I felt like that should be the entire preppy segment. But then I said, well, we should probably stretch it a little bit. But kind of interesting, right, Steve?
Yeah, it is. And it's a good contrast, I think, to hippies, because the whole in the same way that there's kind of like a hippie stereotype aesthetic you can think of right off the bat, you can hear preppy and think of, even, with the store's reference, that you would have to buy your clothes from to be a preppy.
Yeah.
You can see like the look. You can
see there's a look.
There's an 80s movie villain bully look.
Well, and you had asked like, hey, when did hippies start to phase out, or the term in which we know it? And we said, well, the 80s, it was kind of killed it in the way that, the 90s and Nirvana killed, and I mean, that's simplifying things, but kind of killed the 80s. There are a couple characters that immediately popped in my mind. Do you have any favorite preppy type characters that sort of define the preppy for you?
Yeah. Johnny from Karate Kid, who I know has a real name, but he also played the same character in Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah.
Him, and there's James Spader in all his 80s movies, like when he's like the villain guy.
Yeah.
The movie Valley Girl, there's a gentleman who is an actor. He was Buck. We talked about Quentin Tarantino. He was Buck. And Kill Bill, and I won't.
And he liked to sleep.
Yeah,
with
he
women.
liked to drive his truck that was yellow. And he's a very good preppy like villain in the movie Valley Girl with Nicolas Cage. If you get
who directed that? I haven't seen that movie. Is it good? I mean, I'm aware of it.
It's very, very 80s, but it's good in that way. It's got better music than you realize once you see the soundtrack. It's one of those movies that kind of slipped in and got like good songs in their soundtrack instead of like generic 80s sounding songs.
Right. Yeah. All good preppies. And I'm going to throw in a couple of my own. First of all, I want to say we have to do honorable mention to Zach Morris, although, just because that was what Slater called him. And I guess he had a little bit of he was kind of a preppy. Not my favorite, not one of my favorites. My favorites would have to be Carlton Banks from The Fresh Prince.
Yeah.
He was incredible on that show. And the fact that and frankly, now that I think about it, he was on Silver Spoons back in the day. And you could say that Ricky Schroeder and him both kind of pulled off the preppy thing for the 80s. And then, of course, in the 90s when he was Carlton Banks. But to me, the gold standard was Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties was such a great show, and I don't feel like it gets talked about that much. But
I agree with you. It was a big show, and was it on Thursdays with like after Cosby? Was it
that
Cosby
sounds right? I couldn't tell you for
sure.
But
for a bit, yeah.
I know Cheers that was on that night too, so it may have been like a Family Ties Cosby show Cheers situation.
Yeah.
I don't know, but tremendous show, and that character of Alex P. Keaton, I do think really captured the 80s sort of preppy thing. I mean, that character, I can't see that character existing today. Certainly not in any sort of lovable way that he was, but he was reacting to his hippie parents, right?
Ex-hippie parents who finally got jobs and started washing. And it wasn't a coincidence that the bathing and solid employment coincided with each other.
Yeah. Very true. All of a sudden they were corporate because they needed to actually get paid. And then Knox B. Keaton was a Ronald Reagan loving conservative. So I felt that we needed to do one more term to just round everything out, because you've got I thought about doing, so we've done hippies, we've done preppies. Basically we've done like most of the characters from the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Was going to do jock, but frankly, it's kind of like preppies. Preppies means kids that go to prep schools. Jocks means, jocks, people that wear jock straps, and that's where it came from. But then I thought I'd round it out and finish with nerd.
Nerd.
I think nerd is a good one because, again, it rounds out the sort of different it contrasts the other ones we've done before, but also this one actually has an interesting potential etymology. So nerd. The first thing I'll say about nerd is that you were talking before about how fun it is to say dirty hippie. And I don't know what's more fun, saying it or hearing you say it or hearing Rick Dalton say it.
Yeah.
They're all pretty good. But nerd also there's something about saying the word nerd that we like. And Michael Quinion talks about that in his entry to nerd. He mentions that the etymology of nerd, nobody knows for sure. The Oxford English Dictionary says that the origin is uncertain and disputed. It is worth noting that the word nerd, which was also spelled N-U-R-D, has evolved in meaning. So much like hippie, early on, it just meant a dull, unattractive, or even offensive person. The later sort of connotation that we got having to do with like pocket protectors and any, Revenge of the Nerds. That all started back in the 70s and was really highlighted in National Lampoon, who had a poster that said, "Are you a nerd?" And it was spelled N-U-R-D. And if you look this up, or maybe we can put it on our social media, it is the prototypical what back in really the 70s and 80s you would think of as a nerd. So one of the connotations of being a nerd is that you're obsessively good at one thing but bad at everything else. So you're really good at computers, you're not good at social life. No social skills. The earliest appearances of the word nerd go back, and this is where it gets fun, is there are two instances that you can find in the 1950s. Before that, it's not around. We have no idea. And the very first one comes from a little book called If I Ran the Zoo by Dr. Seuss.
Oh.
So, I don't know if you can get your hands on this book anymore, but in 1950, this is what came from If I Ran the Zoo. It says, "And then, just to show them, I'll sail to Catrue and bring back an It-Cutch, a Preep and a Prue, a Nurgle, a Nerd, and a Seersucker too." Then in Newsweek in 1951, it says, "Nerds and Scurs. In Detroit, someone who once would be called a drip or a square is now regrettably a nerd." Or in less severe cases, a scurv. And I've never heard scurv, but
I think in the same way that nerd is fun to say, scurv is just look at my mouth when I have scurv. It's not fun to say. Like filthy hippie. This flows off the tongue, but scurv.
Yeah, I agree. But nerd, they think that, one of the theories is that maybe it's because it rhymes. I mean, this is pretty lowbrow, but that it rhymes with turd, which Michael Quinion says is very unlikely. Trying to find clues of where this came from, or where maybe Dr. Seuss would have heard this. The closest they could find was in 1938. There was a ventriloquist named Edgar Bergen who created a new character. He was the Charlie McCarthy guy. He came up with someone named Mortimer Snurd, and he was like a country bumpkin who was dumb. And some have said maybe Dr. Seuss took it from there. Some say nerd with a K is drunk backwards. I mean, this is a stretch. But he does, Michael Quinion does say his suspicion is there's something about the sound of the word nerd that makes us want to say it. He says maybe it's because it reminds us of a growl of disgust, disapproval, or negation, which if you think of Revenge of the Nerds, I mean, one of the greatest lines is just Ogre going, nerds, you know, just, it's fun to say, it's fun to yell. So anyway, no definitive etymology other than it looks like it was first put in print by Dr. Seuss, If I Ran the Zoo.
Which is one of the books that has been run out of publication, I believe. Is that one of his dangerous?
It's a book so dangerous that it can't be sold on Amazon. I think you know where we stand on that.
And especially, you know, if I wanted to pair up a Dr. Seuss book and a dildo, I'm gonna have to, you know, I have apparently more of a dildo selection than a Seuss selection. Thank you for listening to Origin of Species. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support our show, please become a Species Supporter at patreon.com/Species. As a Species Supporter, you receive great bonus content, including interviews with all our guests, unedited and unfiltered, your cost, whatever you want to pay. You're allowed to contribute any amount that you'd like and receive all benefits available. In addition, I will stand outside your home and follow you back into the house after you go to the grocery store. I will make sure that your hands are full of bags and liquids and things that'll be really tough to put down, and I will quietly walk behind you and come into your house. Become a Species Supporter today at patreon.com/Species. That's patreon.com/Species.
Bob's your uncle?
Watch out for bears. Kale is from the devil.
Species.